I got crickets. And then 5 minutes later, I heard this like cha-ching. I was like, oh my God. And I looked at my phone. I think the first batch sold for like £60 or something. I was like, oh my God, someone's bought this thing for £60. Like, is this real? And then I got another, like straight after, another cha-ching. And then it just didn't stop.
From Ministry of Work, welcome to Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds podcast, a show about Greater Manchester's pioneers, entrepreneurs and visionaries, and the stories that brought their ideas to life. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and on today's show we're joined by Charles Burdett, a designer turned entrepreneur who has built a business selling decks of cards and turning over multi-millions in the process. Charles originally started out stacking shelves before eventually finding his feet as a UX designer. He's since gone on to build a globally recognised business right here in Manchester, a journey which is nothing short of inspiring. From his early tinkering with web design as a teenager to crafting tools that empower professionals worldwide.
I've never stayed in one place for very long. I've always moved around a lot. I've kind of slowly worked my way up north. Ended up going to university in Sheffield and then got my first proper job in Manchester. But yeah, born in West London, moved up through Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Lincolnshire, and then South York. Yeah, so you can see I'm kind of going up the motorway. And my first ever job was at Tesco, stacking shelves, and I was obsessed with like getting, it's called facing up, getting all the products to look really nice. And sometimes I was criticised for not being fast enough, but and then I got another job kind of a little bit later on as a butcher. So I was scrubbing blood off the floor of a walk-in freezer, like frozen blood, which was, that was
as grim as it sounds.
That was a very grim job, yeah. And then I think the first kind of designery job, because I ended up becoming a designer, was working in a t-shirt printer.
Oh, cool.
So actually the first experience I got working with clients was someone coming in and wanting a t-shirt designed, and I would work with them in Photoshop. And I've kind of grown up with Adobe, or Macromedia as it was then, products, obviously pirated way back when. Working with like Flash 3, I think I started with, and Photoshop, I'm going to say Photoshop 2, like as early as that. Making websites in Dreamweaver. So I got a really early start with that kind of thing.
So just a natural attraction to that stuff, I guess.
Well, my mum was in desktop publishing, as it was called. And so we had access to this software. And I just found it magical that you could make websites with this software. And I remember, I think I was like 13 and I got my mum to buy me a domain name so I could make a website in Dreamweaver for my online gaming clan. I was playing Medal of Honor Allied Assault.
Brilliant.
And I was making clan websites with like tables of who's in the roster and all this sort of thing. Getting the bevel right on my buttons and all this, attention to detail. So yeah, I've been like tinkering around with like design and development stuff just for the sheer fun of it since, I think I made my first website when I was like 8.
Yeah.
In like GeoCities or something like that. So, and I think a lot of people my age have like a weird kind of upbringing with that early internet,
I had very similar.
Yeah.
I remember getting given a really old computer that the family obviously upgraded, and it was really naff, but because it was so bad, I could break it and fix it and break it again. Yeah. And I absolutely loved that. And I remember building a website in Dreamweaver, having no idea what to do. I think it was about WWF of all things. Embarrassing myself there. But like just that ability to kind of tinker and lose yourself. And it was...
Well, I was lucky that on my dad's had split parents. So at the weekends, my dad was in IT and I was building computers with him.
Oh, cool.
So on mum's side, I was pirating software, and on my dad's side I was tinkering around with hardware, and that's kind of stuck with me this whole time. So yeah,
love it. And then you eventually sort of get a proper job, shall we say, in designing. Had you gone to university at that point?
Yeah, so I went to Sheffield Hallam University and did a graphic design degree, because through all of this kind of upbringing with messing around with design software, I got really into animation, like Flash animations, and I was really heavily into like the stick figure animation scene of like the early 2000s, and I'd really set my sights on becoming an animator, whatever that looked like as an adult, and ended up going to university to do a graphic design degree with like a specialism in motion design. And when you go to university, like your portfolio is so eclectic. I had like experimental websites, I had stop motion animation, and then when leaving university with this like weird portfolio, like I needed to get a job. Like I just actually signed on to a master's in animation to try and prolong reality and like just stay in education. But the most annoying part of that was that I'd signed a lease for a house, got a career and development loan to actually get onto the course, and I was all ready to go and do my master's in animation. But then I got a letter through to say that my career and development loan wasn't coming through because my credit score failed. And I was like, what? Like I've never taken anything out. And then I remembered the only thing that I could think of that like screwed me over there was a couple of years prior to that. I was going to a wedding and I needed to buy a suit. So I went to Debenhams to go and buy a suit, and it was 150 quid for this like off the rail suit. But I could get it half off if I took out a Debenhams store credit card. It's like, pay it back within 30 days.
Yeah, of course I will.
Of course I will.
Yeah.
31st day, I get a phone call saying it's late. And I paid it back. It's like, I squared that away. But I think that late payment on that credit card...
Yeah, because you were so young.
Yeah, stopped me getting that loan. So I didn't do a master's in animation. So I was desperately looking for a graphic design job. So with my graphic design degree in hand and my weird portfolio, I applied to just anything. I interviewed a waste management company to do like their in-house graphic design. And I interviewed like an outdoor bag manufacturer to like help with their website, like stuff that I felt really qualified to do, because like going to university with, proficient photoshopping skills kind of gets you quite ahead. And obviously, I'm not even getting into the actual design fundamentals there. But I got turned down to all these interviews, and I'm just like, how am I supposed to get a job? Like I thought I've got all the skills I need. And I just kind of went into a bit of a pit of depression. I was basically just smoking weed all day and gaming and not doing anything productive. And I was like burying my head in the sand in this house that I had signed a lease on, burning into my overdraft. And I was screwed basically. And this one job came up, because I was still kind of haphazardly looking. And this job came up for an agency in Manchester for a junior digital designer. And I applied just thinking, I'm really lost hope here. Excuse me. And I didn't hear back for ages, but then I got called up for an interview like literally 4 weeks after applying. And I went there, and everyone was wearing like t-shirts and jeans, and there was like cool stuff on the walls. And in my interview, I was asked like, when was the last time I cried? Like it was a really kind of like emotive, vulnerable, interesting interview. And they loved my portfolio. They loved the weird stuff that I was doing. And I thought, oh my God, could this be it? And then there was a 2-part interview process, but I didn't hear back from them. But then like, I think 40 days later, I got a call saying, do you want to come back in for a second interview? And I was like,
it's a long gap.
Jesus. Yeah. And in that time, I was not doing anything. I was like, right, if that's not going to work out, then I am buggered. I don't know what's going to happen. But they called me back, had the second interview, and then got offered the job like a week later. So I started out at this agency, who've now been bought out, long gone kind of culture-wise. But really that's where I got like my massive start in being around people, living and breathing like real design for real clients, and did some really quite amazing projects there. One of which went viral, and I could talk more about that later. But it's it's just getting that foot in the door, that real lucky break. And I remember my first week, like working with what was called a UX. So they were like a rare thing at that time, like this is like 2014, I think, working with a UX designer to try and figure out how to make it appear that this app that they had made was actually loading, because it was built to be so fast that the user was a bit weirded out that it was loading too quickly. So we had to like design some like fake loading thing, kind of like in The Sims when it's like reticulating splines and all that sort of thing. I remember sitting there like sketching with this guy, Tom Adams his name was, and I remember just thinking, oh my God, I'm getting paid to like
absorb
design
all that as well.
and design. I'm sketching this out, and he's like treating me like an equal, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. But yeah, I really cut my teeth there, just working on so many different things, bringing all of the skills I had from like animation and web design, and really made a go of it. And that was the launch pad for the rest of my career, really.
And that has been your focus, hasn't it? The whole design element of it, like in your career.
Yeah, I think, I call myself a designer even now as a founder. Like, I think even building a business is the act of design, and you have design decisions to make, and how the team's constructed and the product and the marketing, everything.
And so from that job, what was the next step?
So I was there for a good few years, and then I actually left there to go. I became a senior UX designer at the BBC, and I applied to that kind of, again, probably a bit of a theme throughout my career, is applying to that almost as a joke. Like, there's no way that I'm going to get a senior UX design job at the BBC, but I applied and I got it. And then kind of arriving there, realizing that, the varying levels of experience and ability at that senior level made me realize that the job titles are just vastly meaningless in the grand scheme of things.
At that stage of applying, why did you think it was a bit of a joke applying? Like, was it just pure self-doubt, or?
I mean, I'd only really acquired the title UX designer at the agency not that long ago.
Of course, because you went in as a junior.
I went as a junior, then got promoted to a digital designer. This was before UX design was really a marketable thing. And then my job title changed in lieu of actually paying me more, which is a typical agency thing to do. And then the idea of being a senior, when I don't feel like I had turns out I did, but at the time I didn't feel like I had the ability to be a senior. So I just had this massive imposter syndrome that I wasn't good enough. But I think the virtue of applying anyway is the thing that actually got me out of there.
Sure.
But all through the time at the agency and the BBC, like a large part of what I felt to be the thing that kind of segues into like how the business started was it wasn't actually sitting down in a corner and designing really good designs. It was actually my ability to work with people and bring people together, running workshops and that kind of thing. And that was only possible because of the great mentors and experience and people I was surrounded by, which was only possible by getting my foot in the door at a place like that in the first place.
Yeah.
That would not have happened if I got given the waste management design job,
No, and that's it. It's those decisions along the way and the opportunities, the doors that have opened for you that lead you to where you are.
Yeah, and there's so much randomness to that as well.
Definitely.
That can't be underestimated.
What was it like working at the BBC?
If you watch W1A, a lot like that.
Okay.
It's a funny place, but because it's an organization that its whole existence is to survive and not to generate shareholders' profit, which also sounds terrible, but is the nature of the reality. Just the way decision-making happens there and the speed in which things happen, it's just bizarre. It's not a charity, but it's not a profit-seeking company. It's like it needs to basically keep proving its value so it can have the charter renewed. So you might be working on something and the key metric might be, time on page, because we can then prove to senior stakeholders that people find this valuable. Therefore, they can tell, whoever's involved in the charter renewal, look how much engagement we're getting. But the thing is, when I worked on BBC Bite Size, and when someone's coming to a page, if they come and go really quickly by that single metric, which is an annoying thing to have to work with, you don't know if someone's found what they needed really quickly because you've done such a great job designing
It's actually a really well laid out article.
Yeah, it's like, I found a great content design. Like I found the answer to my thing immediately, and I've bounced. That doesn't signal to the metric gatherers that we're doing the right thing. So the incentives behind what we're doing are just all weird. So it is a very highly political bureaucratic place to be a designer for sure. And I worked on stuff for many months that someone came in a room and said, we're not doing that anymore, and all the work went in the bin.
Whoa.
And that was just you just got used to that as a common thing.
Which is kind of soul destroying, right? When you've put a lot of time and effort into it.
I think, it's the first time it happens, it's soul destroying. But then this is the thing, you kind of get used to that. So you stop putting yourself into it as much. And then you realize why everyone's so, for want of a better term, very laid back at the BBC. And, grass can grow between your toes quite easily there. So I didn't even last a year there. After that, I was like, I could go and earn more money contracting. So then I went and started.
Was that the main driver then, or was it a little bit of getting tired of the kind of the bureaucratic nature of it?
I think I just got bored. Yeah, it just wasn't that challenging. It was very easy to have stayed. It would have been really easy to stay. Great pension scheme.
But like say if you're bored, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And I had that itch to like take the plunge into the next thing. And when you find out, how much UX contractors were making, then I was like, wow, I could literally quadruple my salary doing the same thing.
Wow.
So I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go and do that. And that was, a massive, at the time, it felt like a big leap to go from the agency to the BBC. And then it felt like a massive leap to go from the BBC to contracting. But looking back, it was, you're just getting paid in a different way.
Yeah. But I suppose it is that horrible moment that when you are in a full-time employment, the idea of becoming self-employed, it feels ridiculously confusing and complex, even though, like I say, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the main fear of contracting was, if I get a contract lined up, what happens when that ends? Like, will I be able to get work again? But the reality is, if you're good at what you do, they want to keep renewing it. You'll have other people trying to pinch you, and it does get to the point where contracting becomes comfortable. And then you kind of this is just me, I suppose, but wanting to move on to the next semi-uncomfortable thing and, keep pushing yourself in that way.
So you leave BBC, you start contracting, that's going pretty well by that point, presumably. What do you stay contracting until you start your business? Or do you go back into employment?
But that's the thing that really enabled the business to happen, because, I have to set up a limited company and, register for VAT and all the rest of it. So you're set up as a limited company, and you've got all of this capital coming in from your contract, and any little side project you do, you can fund through that. So it kind of accidentally gave me a vehicle to start a business,
to do a few experiments,
almost accidentally. So, and that's how what eventually became Pip Decks. That's the kind of birthing pool for Pip Decks.
So let's delve into that a bit, because I think that's really interesting then. So you're busy contracting, obviously making good money at the time, limited companies, such that it's probably not worth taking loads of that out, and then you have got a bit of the capital then to do something with. So the first sort of idea for what became Pip Decks, was that the very first idea, or was it other things that you sort of looked at or tried?
So I don't know what it was, and it's always a bit of a murky memory, because you can easily misremember things. Like what was my ambition back then? And I don't really remember a great deal about like what I was trying to achieve or get to. I think I was always just trying to improve my situation, iteratively it seemed. But when I started contracting, all these workshops and things that I had gotten good at and got reps in the gym, so to speak, from working with multiple clients and stakeholders of the BBC, and having been almost trained and mentored in the art of workshop facilitation during my career. When you go and do it, I worked at a bank. It was my first contract with a really green design team. And I think on my first day, I went in and ran a workshop, like quite impromptu kind of workshop with a bunch of bankers and people, crossed arms with their ties done all the way up. And there's me in my T-shirt and jeans, completely ignoring the dress code. And I ran a workshop and just remember the kind of resistance everyone felt with me handing out Post-its and asking everyone to start writing their thoughts down instead of just having this kind of chaotic conversation that everyone was used to having with someone chairing a meeting and someone taking notes and then the loudest voice kind of dominating the room. And like half an hour later, after them following my instruction, me asserting myself by standing up and, giving them step-by-step instructions on what to do, we came out at the end of that meeting, or workshop as it was, with like a highly productive output, and people couldn't believe it. And I remember the first time I experienced a workshop, it felt a bit like I was a part of someone else's theatre production. Like it felt so organized and so intentional that the outcome was almost inevitable. And you actually felt like work got done rather than the feeling of leaving a meeting and you're like, okay, so what's happening then? Like who's doing what, And that kind of struck me, but it also struck the team I was working with. Like, wow, I guess they saw me as like this guy that could come in and like run these amazing workshops, which was a blessing and a curse because from then on, I was forever pestered to say, hey, can you run this workshop for, these people that I need help with? Or can you help me run a workshop? Or, can you help me put one together? So purely out of necessity of getting people off my back, I was like, well, let me just put everything I know down in one place on running these workshops. And they were really geared towards like design workshops, like problem solving, understanding, the root cause of a problem, prioritizing stuff, allowing stakeholders to get stuff out of their system and parking it and all that sort of thing. So I put everything I knew down, and all of this stuff is from all over the place, different books and resources. So none of it was like unique to, anything I'd made up. It was all, curated, so to speak. And I thought, well, it would be handy if I had this as like a deck of cards that I could like, just give a tactic to someone and say, hey, do this workshop. And it had a neat set of instructions on the back and it told you what to do, what it was and why you might use it on the front. So I got this really kind of rudimentary prototype made, about a dozen or so, and handed them out. And they were received with like, wow, this is great. I can't believe you've made this for us. Very generous of use of your time. But people still kept coming up to me and asking, which card should I use? And I said, well, I use that one. So I iterated the product again and added in this kind of flowchart system and a category system, which helped basically figure out, okay, ask this question. If yes, go to this category, just to kind of get a starting point. Yep. And so that got people off my back a little bit.
I like the idea of you just running away from people at this stage.
Yeah, I just want to be left alone. Yeah. So that got people off my back a little bit. But what then happened was people would say, oh, I just ran this great workshop using this card, but I don't know what to do next. So I was like, okay. So I got the deck back and really like laid it all out and like, what is the sequence of things here? Like, what would I do after this one? And started really connecting the dots between all the cards. And then updated it again, printed out a new set. And it effectively became a choose your own adventure kind of system. So if the card would say, if you're going to do this, make sure you do this one beforehand. And, and then people could like start sequencing things together. And so when that iteration went out, people largely stopped bothering me. And then it kind of got its own steam, not only in my mind, but in everyone else's mind. This was just at one place that, I was kind of testing this in. And my curiosity was like, well, what happens if I get this made in like the highest quality box and made it look really good?
Because at that stage, that first one, you've done a couple of iterations within that one company. What did it look like? Did it look anything like what it does now? Or
I can send you a picture if you want to flash it up on the screen or something. But it literally looked like it's just a plain white box. It was all focused just on the actual typographical layout of the card. And there was, some sketches in there for like the images on there and things.
Where did you get it made? Did you?
So, God, I can't even remember. I think there was just some playing card printing company online that you could just like get.
Yeah, super.
You just get a deck made really quickly. But it got to the point where, a large part of UX design is trying to de-risk doing the wrong thing and testing things out in a lean way before you actually commit to doing something. And so I was like, right, well, if I did try and sell this, how do I know someone would even buy it? And so before I even thought about going and getting it made, and again, going back to all of my weird kind of software kind of expertise as a kid, like I mocked up the thing in 3D and like got it rendered so it looked like it was the real deal. With, I got my friend to illustrate it and make the box stand out. And there's a whole thing about Seth Godin's purple cow. Like if you make something that stands out, people are going to talk about it. And so I got the thing mocked up in 3D, and then I made a landing page in Shopify. And this was a really interesting exercise because making a landing page was like, right, how do I sell this as if I'm presenting it to someone for the first time? And so the act of writing a sales page for this thing really helps me like hone in on like what is the value of what I've made. And obviously I had users, so I could go and like ask them like, why is this useful to you? And basically chuck this landing page together. And then I, again, using capital from contracting, I ran, I think about £500 worth of LinkedIn ads to this landing page, and then collected a bunch of emails of people that were interested in it. And then I went and ran surveys and like had interviews with all these people that were interested in it. Been like, why have you signed up to this? Like, why is this interesting to you? And then I was basically very risk adverse, and I was just trying to get signals that this was a thing worth taking further.
Yeah, or not.
Or not, because for me, it was just like a dumb little card deck that I'd made to help people. But then I was like, well, maybe there's something here.
It's interesting in that stage of where you've had a prototype version 1 in a environment that people like it and use it, but that's a long step away from being able to sell it.
For sure, yeah.
Real big.
And that for me was like, well, if it can be sold, then I'm very confident in its utility.
Correct.
So
you solved the problem, hadn't you? But it's whether you can sell that problem or not.
So, and that was kind of a semi-new thing to me to actually try and sell versus actually make something that can be useful. And so then I started playing around with numbers like, right, if I'm going to get this many printed, then I'd need to pre-sell this many to fund this initial order. And they'd need to be sold at this price in order to make it worth it. And that price was quite a high price. Like, I think I did a talk at a meetup quite early on, and I kind of flashed the deck, which was Workshop Tactics, which was the first deck, at the end of the talk, and said, oh, by the way, if you're interested in this thing, go and sign up for it and get on the waiting list. Because I was starting to build up this kind of like waiting list of potential customers. And people came up to me at the end saying, well, can I not buy it now? And I did the stupid thing, and it is a stupid thing, of asking them, well, how much would you pay for it? And they're like, oh, maybe like £12. I'm like, God, if I sell it for £12, there's no business here. But obviously, we're selling them for, £100 plus. So it kind of, that's a whole hour of talking about pricing psychology.
But it is interesting because it's
what people say is not what they do, right?
Correct.
And if someone's not willing to pay that, then they're probably not the right customer for you. But anyway, the story then kind of fast forwards to launching to that list had got to about 300 to 500, right? It wasn't massive, but I was then confident in the numbers that I'd kind of punched together. I found a factory that was going to produce it, and kind of got everything lined up. And I thought, right, I'm going to pre-sell as many as I can to fund the initial print run. And I remember like send on this like email to the whole list saying, hey, you can now pre-order Workshop Tactics. And by this point, I had the prototype made, like the real thing, so I could see what they were going to get. And I had, sent photos of that and everything. And I sent this email out, and then, it got crickets.
Oh, really?
And I was like...
So you sent that to about 500 people?
I got crickets. And then 5 minutes later, I heard this like cha-ching. I was like, oh my God. And I looked at my phone. I think the first batch sold for like £60 or something. I was like, oh my God, someone's bought this thing for £60. Like, is this real? And then I got another, like straight after, another cha-ching. And then it just didn't stop for like the next hour. And I think, I managed to sell maybe like 70 or 80% of the list bought, which was insane.
That's huge.
I was like, wow, this is... And that was the moment I was like, okay, this is a thing. Like this is a thing.
Interesting. Do you think that was because you'd put so much time into, I guess, giving that list proper attention?
Possibly.
Because sometimes, from my experience, that number's like way lower normally, but probably because everyone's just kind of like got any old name in the hat from anywhere.
Yeah.
But presumably because you said you're doing interviews and you were going quite in depth with some of these people, you'd probably already built a relatively decent connection with a lot of them.
Quite possibly. I mean,
but it's still amazing. That's like as much evidence as you possibly need.
Yeah, and as soon as that cash came in, I was like, well, I can place the order. And this was when I remember ordering, I think I had the option to either order 1,000 or 2,000. And I remember thinking, is it even possible that I could sell 2,000 of these? I think I ended up pre-selling maybe 200 in the end.
That's amazing.
Which, £60 each, kind of do the maths.
And what was the wait time? What did they have to wait for that to come to get it in hand?
Months. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah,
wow.
It's so long.
That again is a great testament though, because if you do that and then you get that success when they know full well they've got to wait months.
Yeah, I think they ordered it early. I think early 2020. Oh, this is the other thing. This was the height of COVID. I thought this was all dead in the water. We'd all been kicked out of the offices.
Yeah, why would they possibly need?
Yeah, no one's in meetings. No one's handing out cards. Everyone's at their desk. I thought this was dead in the water.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Obviously, because it is a physical product anyway.
Yeah.
So with everyone going to work from home, you'd think it would have been a problem for your business.
I think there's so many factors involved, which is, people during COVID, they were spending money because they were not spending on anything else. True. I think people wanted something to get away from their screen, potentially. I think it's just, it was quite a new thing. There was a novelty to it as well. But yeah, I got that kind of initial print run through and then just did that kind of whole kind of grindy marketing thing of like, writing blog posts and God knows what else I was doing, like Instagram posts and things like that. And it got to a point where, I was selling like 2 or 3 a week by word of mouth.
Wow.
And it got to the point where, this was now paying the mortgage and the bills. I'm like, wow, I'm going to quit this contracting job and like spend time with my newborn son. Huey had just been born. But it's funny because you're going to find this so funny, is that at the time I was still like looking around and thinking like, what is the actual business I'm going to start? I thought this was I was like, my legacy isn't going to be a dumb little card deck company. Because that's what I kind of viewed it as. Like,
I suppose it was a bit of fun, right?
I was just following my
I
was just following my curiosity, and like I'd got this thing working, and people were buying it, and it was paying the bills. Like, right, that's all well and good.
Interesting. Then, did you? Was that? Do you think? Because you probably thought people will stop buying it at some point.
Well, I felt like again, there's that imposter syndrome of is all this too good to be true? Is it just a flash in the pan? Are people gonna like find out that it is just a deck of cards, or are people gonna? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just felt like a fraud. Like, there's no way this is.
I remember that.
There's no way this is real. I ought to go and think about what the proper business is that I'm going to start. And again, kind of what we're talking about before we started talking here today was about the perception I felt my peers had on me of like, who does he think he is going and starting a card deck company, selling them for that much money? Like, who does he think he is? And it really kind of weighed on me.
It's a weird voice that you have in the back of your head, isn't it? Where it's like, I don't know what it is. It's a mixture of seeing self-doubt, but also probably worrying what people think. And some people do think those things, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, I imagine they do. I mean, you only have to go on our Facebook comments to see how many people absolutely hate the existence of these things. But equally, we've now sold hundreds of thousands of these things, and we've expanded the library. I think we're coming on to like 10 decks now. Got a growing team, and now we're called Pip Decks. Like, the moment we went on to do I went on to go and do the next deck, that's when I realized that this is a format that's quite extendable into other things.
Yeah, loads of things. What was it originally called?
So it was just Workshop Tactics. Okay. It was workshoptactics.com, and it was just about workshop facilitation, and everything was around that. But then it was like, well, what if we did, storytelling was a huge interest of mine. I thought, well, I probably could write it, but I probably don't have the same authority behind me to really truthfully do a great Pip Deck, as they're now called, on storytelling. So that's when I partnered with a good friend of mine, Steve Rawling, who's been doing business storytelling for, used to be a journalist at the BBC. And we did a Kickstarter together for the second deck. And obviously I didn't need to do a Kickstarter because I'd already figured out the way of pre-selling it.
Yeah. But
it was just one of those entrepreneur bucket list things of like,
I want to
doing a Kickstarter. And I think we raised like $100,000, and that deck has like dwarfed the popularity of workshop tactics. Now storyteller tactics is like, that's the thing that really.
So who's your typical audience for buying that?
I mean, I've ultimately learned that the people that love Pip Decks are people that love learning. It's just, like, we have pastors in middle America.
It's not necessarily a business tool then, is it?
No,
per se?
We have people using it to write novels. We have people using it to create sermons for their churches.
That's cool.
We have people obviously in management positions to try and help pitch things and convince stakeholders and people.
Would they use it in a similar way to the workshops, or would they use it more in like an isolated? That they just use it themselves?
Well, yeah, it did kind of raise the interesting question of like, so why cards? Like, what is the nature of the card format? And whilst the workshop cards are great for being a team setting,
because you can pass it around.
But equally, I was speaking to my dad yesterday, and he said, "Son, I don't know if I told you this, but like I felt embarrassed to get the deck that you gave me out in a meeting. My I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but I'm a team leader, and I don't want my kind of younger staff to think I've bought this thing off the internet, and he's go, what's this old man doing with these cards?" So there is an element of like, and I appreciate that. And there's obviously a different type of person who's like happy to bring them out and share them and things like that. I'm kind of going off piece here now, but this storytelling, the format really is powerful because you can go on ChatGPT or Google and search storytelling techniques or tips, and you can find loads of stuff. We've realized that the value of Pip Decks is trying to fit concise information on the back of a card, which forces you to be really concise. You can't afford the luxury of like a 2,000-page SEO optimized web page, or being a really laborious book that can get really into the detail, which can be really interesting and entertaining. But the art of a Pip Deck is, how can we get it so concise that you can just skim it and be like, right, I got it. And there is like, the tip of the iceberg is the deck, but underneath that is the amount of effort it takes us to make them like as readable as they are. But then there's the kind of limited nature of the cards. There's only 50 odd cards in each deck. And that starts with like 1 to 200 that we have to cut away and be like, what is the essentials to do workshops, to do storytelling, to do strategy? This is all you need. So we're curators of, I guess, timeless content, because this stuff has got to be effective in 20 years from now, and it was effective 20 years ago. So
it's distilling it down, isn't it?
It is this distillation, but it's also a real job in making it really useful. And that's actually a really hard thing, because you could just like write anything you want and just hope for the best. Yeah. But workshop tactics, it went through the ringer. People were like, "Oh, I don't understand this card. Oh, this bit doesn't make sense here." So the content with a book, you can just have an editor kind of go through it, maybe get a few test reads, but largely it doesn't need to be a tool.
If there's a wishy-washy bit in the middle, no one's going to care, are they? Whereas yours, every word counts.
Yeah, and there's a saying we got at Pip Decks, which is, every word is unnecessary until proven essential, which really helps us. God help us when we translate them to German, because it makes the whole card like 150% longer. So
bigger cards.
Yeah, maybe Germans have
play your cards right style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
amazing. So I just find that really interesting. The different demographics of people using the cards, because what started out as a pure business tool effectively has transcended that and become. Is it borderline like collectible? Would you say, with some of the people using it, or do people still only buy it for their specific purpose or job or?
Well, I think a lot of people buy. There is something about the collectability of them. I haven't quite fully grasped yet, which is that when we release a new deck, even if it's a topic someone's not necessarily, that interested in, they will buy it just to keep their Pip Decks collection complete.
And probably also a testament to the value that the other ones have delivered, I guess, because they're probably thinking, well, I'll buy it because I'll learn and I'll be able to use. That's another, string to their bow if they can engage with it, I suppose.
And we're trying to make topics that are like highly impactful. So we've got negotiation tactics coming out.
Oh, cool.
Either I don't want to put a date on it, but like soon, really soon. And we've been working with an active working hostage negotiator, and she's negotiated with like ISIS and Al Qaeda, like serious stuff, over 700 different hostage situations, 99% success rate. And we've worked with her to distill all the knowledge in her brain into a Pip deck on negotiation. And it's like, even if you don't find yourself in a negotiation situation, I spent a week with her.
Well, that's going to be super valuable from a sales point of view, even, isn't it?
Yeah, like there's so many applications of even negotiating with your kids. Like if you don't give a child a yes/no option, you give them an option A or an option B question. So there's little things like that. The thing about negotiation is once you're aware of all of the, I don't like to call them tricks, but once you're aware of all of the techniques or tactics, as would call them, it feels really dangerous to have been going about your life not knowing them. Because if someone's negotiating with you and you don't realize what they're doing and you just play into it, it's almost like worth just having that knowledge just to be aware of it, even if you're not actually actively negotiating.
By the way, that's your advert for that next set, because I'm like, I need to buy that now.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So you've mentioned you've literally sold hundreds of thousands of packs by now.
Yeah.
So these are worldwide, right?
Yeah.
That's wild.
It is. It's hard to really understand the impact of that, because you're just kind of working on the next thing. But we've got, you name a company, they've probably got a set on a desk somewhere, and for so many different reasons. And it's just a hugely, for me, going from dumb little card deck company to wow, we're now giving people confidence in their career to do things that they might not otherwise have done, and to hear stories back from customers about the success they've had.
And I think that must be mad, because I bet there's so many use cases that you never envisaged that then you get the testimonial or the case study what? We didn't even expect it to have that outcome, probably.
Yeah, and I think why that happened is why hasn't this happened yet with anything else? And what endlessly fascinates me is the branding side of a business and what attracts someone to a thing. If you were to, 2019, if my future self said to me, hey, you're going to sell hundreds of thousands of card decks with cartoon characters on for £150 plus, I'd be like, how is that even possible? But, kind of in the spirit of Rory Sutherland, sometimes bad ideas aren't bad ideas. The opposite of a good idea can also be a good idea. And there is something about the nature of, again, going back to design, how they're designed really creates this approachability to them. So, we've got a deck called Strategy Tactics, which is such a misnomer anyway, the fact it's called Strategy Tactics. But, this breaks down really dense, kind of quite intellectual theory of business strategy, which draws upon, ancient warfare strategy and all the rest of it. And the deck really tries to pivot away from using war analogies for strategy as well, I might add. But throwing cartoon characters on that, writing it in plain English so it treats you with respect, to not assuming any prior knowledge, and then showing you how to tie these things together. I think just making stuff approachable and accessible for people, I think, has been the thing that's really been what's resonated with so many people. I mean, early on, when we started advertising on Facebook and Instagram, even now, all we need to do is show the product without comment, because it kind of does what it says on the tin. it's like workshop tactics, and then it's got the tagline, you know, ditch dull meetings, and it's like, oh right, so I kind of get what it does, and it looks cool. Like honestly, if you just make stuff look cool, that's half the battle.
It's true.
If it looks cool and then it actually works, you've kind of got like.
Well, I think that's the difference in it. You can make something look cool and sell it once, but if it doesn't work, they're not buying again.
Yeah.
But the true testament is the fact that people keep buying this, and even buy the ones they don't really need. Like that.
Yeah, but you'd hope that they buy them almost. You know, why you buy books that you don't ever read is because it's that potential energy on your bookshelf that one day I might need that. You know, and I'm a hoarder. I'll go up in the attic and be like climbing the ladder, like everything in the attic needs to go. And you go up there and look and be like, nope, might
Can't throw any of this out.
Might need all that one day. Yeah.
That's fab. Yeah, I just think it's such an amazing like journey that you've been on to have sold as many as you have, and the thing that's probably most exciting from my side even is who knows where it could go. Like new topics, new avenues, new markets. Like it's a really exciting business, and just wish you all the success with it.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, it's just more of the same, really. There are big topics that we haven't covered yet that we want to do, languages we haven't done yet. But yeah, just keep doing the thing that we're really good at is the name of the game now. So yeah.
That's Charles Burdett, founder of Pip Decks. Pip Decks reflects Charles's belief that work should feel like play, so his business offers practical yet amazingly designed resources to help with exactly that. Thank you so much for listening to the show this week, and please make sure to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss a new episode of the show. And don't forget to check out Ministry of Work, where you can join our exclusive work club. This episode was produced, recorded, and edited right here at Ministry of Work, with a special thanks to our studio manager Dan Brown, and of course to you for listening. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and this has been Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds.